welcome to Friday. You're going to go to your dashboard. You're going to click on biology. You're going to go to the arrow to current lessons. You're going to look at current lessons page, which has everything on it from now till the end of the semester. You're going to go to the Google Meet links to be able to come to the live lesson. Here's your virtual schedule with a help support time right there with a link. This is the time, 10:30 to 11, Tuesday through Friday. Monday is our time with homerooms. Here's the final exam schedule, and you can click on that. It'll enlarge for you to see it. Below this is our daily details. This is the week's assignments. This is Friday, so everything on this list is an official end of the week list. This was due Monday, or we took this Monday. We did this Tuesday. This was assigned Wednesday. This was given on Wednesday. These were assigned on Thursday, and this is today's quiz. All these items here are the assignments. Here's how much they're worth. This is the only one that's an opportunity to do it or not. These are the true due dates. This is the final date that the assignment will be accepted. If you go down here, I have the quiz link. That's also right there. It's right here. You need to make sure you take this quiz. I'm giving you 2 attempts on this quiz. On this quiz here, because I gave you a really long list, I won't do that again, but it is what it is for now. You can take this over 3 times. If we go here, this is a PowerPoint that I created specifically for the final exam. So we're going to go through this here in just a second. And then after we're done, your goal is to make sure that you study. Let's go ahead and click on this PowerPoint. This has been created for the final exam to show you exactly what you need to know. I'm not going to give you all the nuts and bolts. Some of this you're going to have to research on your own because you've been informed on the information, and you should be able to find it in your notes or use your resources to do so. The only 2 vocabulary words that stood alone that didn't really fit somewhere were biology and biodiversity. So you'll need to look up those 2 words in your notes. You need to be able to answer the following questions following content. Characteristics of life. You need to know what that is. Determine the proper lab equipment to use when. Scientific methods, steps, read a data table, and know what an autotroph is. That might be a couple of those things might be mentioned again. Characteristics of living things. Here's the list of those, and here they are as well. They give you examples here to explain what they are, but you have cellular organization, meaning that they're either made up of single-celled or multicellular organism. They reproduce, have offspring. They obtain energy by eating or using the sunlight. It's the ability to make energy from whatever they consume or create, like in plants, they make their own. Homeostasis is maintaining that internal environment. Heredity is what you pass on. Responsiveness is that responding to stimuli, which is me responding to my hand on the stove. Grow and develop is me going from an infant to an adult. Adapt through evolution is either you figure it out or you die. So if my beak doesn't work for me because I live somewhere where the nuts are harder to get open, my beak can eventually evolve so that I could eat those seeds. Homeostasis. This is going to be a question on the test that you're going to need to know this. I did give you some examples because that's kind of what one of the questions ask. So make sure that you know that examples of homeostasis is that its purpose is to regulate, to keep things the way they're supposed to be. Make sure that the rate of water and minerals is right, your body temperature is right, your chemical levels are right, including your blood sugar. Here's some lab equipment. You will need to know how to use these items. This is a test tube, watch glass, crucible, weighing balance, spatula, beaker, spring scale, measuring cylinder, burette, funnel, wash bottle, and anemometer. Test tubes are used when you have something that you need to collect or do an experiment with. A watch glass, you usually use that to measure out something. A crucible, you can heat to high temperatures. Obviously, you're going to put something on this to measure the mass of the object. A spatula, you just stir with it. A beaker, you can fill with water. It has a measuring units on the side. A spring scale will measure newtons. That is a force, push or pull on an object. And this is a graduated cylinder. It has the measurements on the side. It's more accurate than a beaker. So you'll see people use this when they're trying to be precise. And this they can use where you're just kind of eyeballing it. Burette's used for experiments that you're going to titrate. So you can open this valve and things can drop one at a time in there. A funnel, I'm sure you've used a funnel before, helps control what goes into the container without making a mess. Wash bottle, that's usually just squirt water into something. You could use that for various things. And then this is to measure amperage. So when you're using electricity, it'll tell you how much voltage or amps you have in the object. Scientific method. You must know how to find the independent, dependent, and conclusion. I'll leave that up to you to look at that. Here are the steps that we've already covered: question, research, hypothesis, procedures, materials, the method, how you're going to do it, collecting data. Remember, that's quantitative, qualitative. Well, your observations would be your qualitative, your data would be your quantitative, and this is where you'd make your graph and your data tables. And then your conclusion is wrapping it up in a nice little bow. Okay, moving on to ecology. You had a food chain, which was just one group of animal after the other, and this is a food web. The questions on the test refer to a food web, so you're going to want to be able to read this as well as remember what level they're in, which trophic level they're in. So if I want to ask you, if I said to you, pick a primary consumer, remember on the test it won't have this. You'll have to know how to read this. So you're following the arrows. This arrow here is talking about this level is consuming this, and this level is consuming these, and this level is consuming this. So remember, it's a pyramid, and the ones on top are the ones at the top of the food chain. So here's our pyramid. This is actually an energy pyramid. So since everything above this is consuming whatever ate below, so for example, the primary producers are autotrophs, like plants. They do photosynthesis. They're going to be the ones who are eaten by the primary consumers. So when that happens, you lose 10% of the energy as you go up the trophic level. So from here, if I have 100,000 kilocalories, it goes down to 10,000 as this one consumes the producers. Then as the secondary consumers consume the primaries, you lose another 10%, which gives you 1,000. And as the tertiary consume the secondary, you lose another 10%, which gives you 100 kilocalories for this level, for the fourth trophic level. And then again, you lose 10% for the apex predators, which gives them 10 kilocalories. Now, if you look here, this numbered the trophic levels, but up here, it gave you the names. You need to know these names when we're talking about the food web. The trophic levels for the energy pyramid are a little different. I also gave you a video here to watch, and here it gives you some hints that you need to know. You need to know this 10% rule because you will be asked to read this table, this pyramid, and know how to use it, just like I just explained. You need to know autotrophs, heterotrophs, how they obtain their food, know how to read the energy pyramid, know how to determine trophic level. Moving on, we're talking about population growth. What causes the population to grow? Know about exponential, and I wrote exponential twice, and carrying capacity. It should have said exponential and logistic growth, and then carrying capacity. So here's an example of polar bears. You may see a graph like this. The red line is going to be the polar bear population. It's going over time, over years, and the population of them. And what happens is this curve here is the carrying capacity, which means it's how much resources are available based upon the animals consuming them. So if they are consuming above that line, it's saying that they're way off and they have too much population in order to continue that level. So that's why you see it dip back down. So same thing here. If you're on this scale in a population, the growth rate of the population is accelerating, which means it's growing uncontrollably, and meaning it's going to go on and on and on. Exponential means never ending, right? Logistic is going to turn into an S curve. See how it's kind of an S? You're going to see carrying capacity of the environment. So again, it's like this one over here. You're going to have where it's starting to grow exponentially, and then this is the point of maximum growth, and then you're going to see it level off and then go back to carrying capacity. Again, if it looks like this, it means it's going over carrying capacity, and the environment can't handle that. It has to stay within that carrying capacity because that's what the environment can handle, the resources available. Okay, again, ecology, competition, invasive species. You need to know what competition is, and you need to know what invasive species are. Here's a little blurb on that for you. You have two organisms competing for the same resources. That's a bad thing. You can't have that. So at some point, something has to give. Invasive species, this is another bad thing that can happen is, actually it's happened in Indiana and in the United States with honeysuckle. Honeysuckle smells wonderful, but it's a very invasive species. And what happens is it crowds out the resources that should be here native, and it causes an imbalance, right? I did stick biodiversity here, so you can certainly look at that. That's the word I had at the very beginning. Okay, so we have ecosystem symbiosis. We have three types. We talked about mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. Remembering that mutualism, they both are benefiting. Commensalism means that this one doesn't really care because he doesn't gain anything or lose anything. And this one gains. And then this one here, one gains, one loses. So you need to know how those work. Interaction between, here's symbiosis telling you what it is, the interaction between two organisms, whether they're mutualistic, commensalism, or parasitism. Biotic is talking about living things. Here's examples of what those living things are. It's anything living, it's not just this list. Biotic means to be alive, and abiotic means it's not alive. Need to know those terms. All right, biochemical cycles. Remember this? This was a pretty complex process. So over here kind of draws that out for you. Explaining, you'll need to watch the arrows, but if we look at the biogeochemical process here, you're going to see the cycles. We talked about the water cycle, the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, and phosphorus cycle. You need to know that nitrogen fixation, where you're seeing the bacteria in the soil, is why the nitrogen cycle occurs. Without that nitrogen cycling, you have to have that bacteria continue to move into the obtain so that you can continue to use that cycle. So over here, energy flows through the ecosystem and is recycled, which you need to remember. That's the most important thing, is that it's recycled. It moves between living and non-living things. And then these are the different cycles that we talked about. They conserve, which means that the energy is never lost or gained, which is a good thing. Here's a little video to go through all of them again for you. Carbon enters the atmosphere through carbon dioxide from respiration and combustion. Carbon dioxide is absorbed by producer to make glucose and photosynthesis. Animal needs pass carbon dioxide along to the chain. Perfect. Everything written on all these slides is to benefit you for the final. So you need to be sure to go through this, make your own notes on it, write it a different way, whatever works for you. So again, this is continued. Here's some key points. Plants that take in carbon dioxide from the air turn it into sugar using energy from the sun and water. So when they're burnt in a fire, they release the remaining carbon dioxide to the air. You need to find out, why do you think that plants, what would happen to the earth if all the plants would die? Consider if there was no more oxygen produced. How can we reduce carbon in the atmosphere to reduce carbon emissions? You should have some pretty good ideas of that as well. Nitrogen cycle video, here's a video that you can watch for that. Note the important organisms in the cycle, which again I said was the bacteria. Understand this process of all the cycles. Kind of already mentioned that as well. Cell theory, you do need to know all the 3 parts of the cell theory, that all organisms are composed of cells. Cells are alive and the basic living unit of organisms, and all cells come from cells. Here's cells. So here's how you know you have a plant cell. Here's how you know you have an animal cell, and these are the things they have in common. The Venn diagram, right? Cells are the smallest unit of living things. 2 types of cells are multicellular, single-celled. This is multicellular. Here's your single-celled. Remembering that a eukaryotic cell, which is multicellular, has a nucleus. Prokaryotic cell is single-celled and does not have a nucleus. You need to know what a stem cell is, and you need to know the function of ribosomes and mitochondria. So here, stem cells kind of worked out for you. A cell with a unique ability to develop into specialized cells by the body. So stem cells are not differentiated. So what they do when they're not differentiated is they can turn into any type of cell. So you see here, it's turned into a nerve cell. I'm not sure what that's supposed to be, but blood cell, muscles, and I'm not sure I know what that's supposed to be. Is that a plant? Maybe, I don't know what that is. Cork? I don't know. Oh, over here it looks better. So, nerve cell. I'm still not sure what that is. This looks like fat. Anyway, so the cells are undifferentiated, which means they don't have a specific purpose. They're just a cell. They're not defined yet. So once they go through cell division, at some point they either stay as not any specific cell, just a regular cell with all the parts, or it can come out of the cycle and become specific. And that's what these are. These are specialized cells. These are specialized cells. All your cells come from your stem cells. That's why they're called stem cells to begin with. And stem cells are undifferentiated, which means that's why we use those when we do replacements of whatever they're trying to make. They've used it for growth of things. Like if I lost my ear, they could use stem cells to make a new ear for me. It's because these can be turned into anything, differentiated by encouraging it to become something. So I want to draw specific attention here. This is 2 neurons. I'm showing you how they connect right here. These axons and dendrites connect one another in a synapse. They don't actually touch. They release chemicals between them to pass on a nerve impulse through here. This here is the nucleus up here. There's not a nucleus at both ends. This sheath here is so that the nerves can travel the electrical current through quickly, kind of like an insulator on a wire. And then you'd have multiple of nerve cells attaching all over the place. If you ever look up any of these, they're all over like a bright light because it's nerve impulses passing through there like electricity. Here's a differentiated cell into cell tissue. This is a specific type of tissue. So this brings us to cell organization. So when you look at this list, we're talking about simple to complex. If you read this list backwards, it would go from complex to simple. So a complex organism is a human being. And then if I break myself down, like take myself apart, I'd go down to an organ system. I have a bunch of organ systems in my body. Then I'd be specific organs. Then if I looked at those, I could see I have specific tissues. Then I can see that I'm made up of cells. If you break down the whole structure of a human, you're going to see you have molecules. And then we all started out as atoms. So that's the last thing if I'm breaking things apart. What comes from the earth goes back to the earth. Because that is a law. Matter cannot be created nor destroyed, just rearranged. So here's a picture over here showing you the same thing. It's showing the atoms to the molecules, to the cellular level, then the tissue, then the organ systems, then the organism. So be sure you know this backwards, forwards. Here's a practice that you can do here to kind of see how well you know it. Cell transport. Here's a video to help you kind of review that. Remember, this is a cell membrane. It surrounds the cell. If I were to take a microscope and look at it close up, I would see that it looks like this with the heads and the tails. Remember, the inside loves the fat. The outside loves the water. Hydrophobic, hydrophilic. Those are our words. Hydrophilic likes water. Hydrophobic is scared of water, doesn't like water. So what you need to know is that this membrane is made up of proteins and phospholipids, which is what we talked about, the phospholipid bilayer. You need to remember your active and passive transport. Remembering passive transport doesn't require energy. Types of passive transport were simple diffusion, osmosis, which is a type of diffusion, but only includes water. Simple diffusion includes everything else, moving from an area of high concentration to low. Facilitated diffusion, remember that's it going across the membrane through a protein channel that is going to still go from areas of high concentration to low. Active transport requires energy. Endocytosis, if you remember, it's going to bring the molecule into the cell, so it's going to engulf it and bring it in. Exocytosis is where it surrounds it in the cell and takes it out, like gets rid of it. Sodium potassium pump is where you saw the protein embedded inside there. Remembering these are going from areas of low concentration to high, so they're kind of going upstream. That's why they have to have the energy. And then, so things can cross the membrane through these channels and they go from low to high. All right, moving on. Photosynthesis. So photosynthesis, you know, photosynthesis and respiration, they work the opposite of one another. We'll see the equation here in a minute. But we have water uptaken through the roots. We have carbon dioxide in through the stoma. We have light that causes the reaction, and out comes oxygen, and then the plant saves the carbon dioxide and the ATP for energy. Photosynthesis and respiration are chemical reactions. You need to know how to be able to read a graph about photosynthesis and respiration. You need to know that photosynthesis makes glucose, which is sugar. Cellular respiration, glucose sugar is converted into ATP energy it can use. Remember that ATP is the energy, and it can't use that, so it has to turn it into ADP. We'll see that here in a minute too. All right. Photosynthesis respiration equations. This is photosynthesis. This is respiration. You'll see that they're the opposite. So for photosynthesis, I have to have 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O with sunlight making oxygen and sugar, glucose. This is the reactant, this is the product, and this is the yield. This is what it takes. Without this, it would never happen, like our cake in the oven. Now look, here's the oxygen, here's the sugar. This is now the reactant for cellular respiration. I ate food if I were a person, and I And then once I consume food, of course, this is an animal cell. Plant cells are the only ones who are going to obtain their food from the sun. But if I were to eat food, I'm going to use what I made in order to do cellular respiration. All cells respire, plants and animals. Any living cell is going to respire. They're individual, tiny, microscopic cells. All of them respire. So in the case of photosynthesis, you have oxygen and sugar, and then your yield, and then you're going to have carbon dioxide and water, and then ATP. Remember that ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. This picture, you need to remember this picture. This is on the test, and all it's trying to show you is that you went from this large molecule and you broke it down. Notice how it's broken down over here differently than it was here, and that's all it's talking about. That you're starting out with a molecule that's been broken down into something else, but nothing is lost. It's only being rearranged. Nothing is being lost. I think that's it. Here's our cycle of ATP and ADP cycle. Animals and plants make ATP, and then that's broken down into ADP to create energy that the organism can use. This is showing you that cycle. Remember, ATP has 3 phosphates. It drops one to become ADP, and then it gains that back as the cycle continues. Plants make food and animals eat food to access the energy in the food and use the food to make energy molecules. Okay, well, it looks like my video cut off. I think I had more than that. It seems like I did. But we'll stop there. And let me know if you have any questions. Go through that, make your own notes, set it up your own way, and we'll talk soon.